Okay, I'm going to attempt to do a little watercolor demo of one of my little drawings of a hummingbird. And this is how I begin. A base coat, only the area I'm wanting to work in at that time in water. The watercolors I'm using is the koi set that you can get at Hobby Lobby. I think it's available on Amazon and maybe a few other sources like that. I bought mine online somewhere, but I don't remember where. But they do have them at Hobby Lobby. So just the area that you want to work on at that time, and then taking a round brush. I like to use a round a lot of times. It's not really a watercolor brush per se, it's just a round brush that I happen to have and like using. Then with the color on the brush, I start laying it in so that I refer to it as kind of stains that area with some color. And I go back and I rinse the brush, but then I kind of blot it on a paper towel and pick up some of the excess water so that I can see how much color is actually in that particular area. And so since that's still really wet, I wouldn't start another color that was too close to it. But I'm going to see if I can lay in the little beak ever so lightly here. And I just do kind of a brush mix of a black color and I think it's a dark brown, Van Dyke brown maybe. I'm not sure because I don't remember all the color names of the watercolors in this set. Because for the most part, I just use colors that I like, so I don't always know color names. But I lay in some color, and same as I did before, blot the excess water, and then kind of move that color that I just put down around some. So then that would dry, and what I'll do is I'll come down here and base coat in the little branch that he's on. Twig, branch, limb, whatever you want to refer to it as. And then with just a little of the brown color, I will I call it more or less a wash of color because I like to thin the paint and then I go back with just a wet brush. And these are probably not, for most people, traditional watercolor techniques. This is just something that I started doing over the years, actually experimenting with acrylics and turning them into watercolors. So I sort of do the same thing with my actual watercolors. I have this set. I have a cheapo set from Michael's that I got, years ago. And then I have a set of watercolor pencils. But these are just my go-to set for right now. Okay, here I just took the darkest green on the palette and a little bit of the Van Dyke brown and created just a kind of a subtle, shadowy green looking color to paint the wing that's supposed to look like it's behind the bird, because you don't have to do a lot of detail to it. So you just want to put something there that lets the viewer know that that was a wing. So now up here on his head, I'm going to add a little more water, blot some of the excess, but I want to just intensify and strengthen that green at the top of his head because it's so bright and bold, especially when the sun is shining on it. And I apologize if it sounds like I swallowed a frog. I've been outside doing yard work and bird feeders and all that stuff for the past couple of days. So now my sinuses are wreaking havoc, and they're not liking me right now. So the one thing I like about watercolor and working on watercolor paper is I find it very forgiving as long as you start with the small amounts of color and water and small sections. I just find I can do so much with it to give the look that I want. Now I'm taking that same green color that I used on its head, which is the lightest color green in the little palette, and taking I think it's the next darker green. And I just do a little brush mix of the two. What I want is the wing color to just be just different enough from the head that my little head really stands out and shines. When I first started doing little hummingbirds like this, I did them on watercolor paper, but I actually did them with just thinned acrylics. And I would just thin down my acrylic paints to a watery consistency and load the different colors on the brush, and that's how I used them. I kind of faded the bottom area of that wing back out to almost water. I'll go back and I'll re-strengthen it, but I want to go on and lay in some of my ruby red throat area, because here in the area where I live, that's what we have predominantly, is ruby-throated hummingbirds. So I tend to just paint them because they're in my area. And I saw my first one yesterday on my flowering quince bush. Same way as with the other sections, I pre-wet it, lay in some color, and then I work that color down to what I just feel like from eyeballing it is a comparable area of color for the ruby red throat. I don't look at a picture when I do these. I don't even usually go back and look at previous paintings I have done. I just know what they look like in my mind, so I just paint what my mind sees. Oh, excuse me. Hoping some water would help the throat some. So now that that little section of red is dry, I'm going to strengthen the green a little bit more on the head. And I start at the top and then just kind of work my way down. I rinse the brush and then just work that color that I've already put there just to the section that I want it in. So I've just about got his head like I really, really like it. So I'm going to come back and add a little bit of water again on the beak. And with just a touch more of the dark, I want to just almost make it look like a shadow on the bottom part of the beak, leaving that little bit of light at the top. So when I watch them out my kitchen window, I have a feeder where I can see them really well. And the little top half of the beak almost looks like it's white because of the way the reflection will be on it. So let's add a little more. And I usually just take and brush mix a couple of the different reddish shades in the watercolor palette. I don't remember the names, like I said, because I just see the little cubes of color and I don't know them by heart. I just know which ones are my favorites, so those tend to be the ones that I will work with the most. Anytime you get something that you're not quite sure, or you think, oh no, I've gotten too much, rinse your brush and go back and kind of blot it with just a damp brush. A lot of times it will remove all of that excess, and then you don't have to worry about it. Now I want to come in down here at the little underbelly section, which is going to be under the wing, and put a little bit of a shadowy green, but I don't want it to end up getting too bright, so I actually mix either a little bit of the Van Dyke brown or the black with it to tone it down some. Then pull that to where you can see it. It just is a shadow. Then the next area of color, I want to take a little bit of that brownish shade and just ever so lightly, I just want a little on the brush, but just enough that I can move some color around with a damp brush. So I work it at that edge into the green, and I let it come almost up to the red of the ruby throat. It's like just a tiny, tiny little bit there of a whitish area that I don't usually put any. Now I want to come back and work on the wing. So I'm going to dampen that wing area and pick up that medium shade of green and a little bit of the light green and just a touch of the brown. Then what I do is I get me a little color started and turn and twist your piece to however it is most comfortable for you to work on. Now I want a little more of that bright green right there. I like those little intense sections of color that I get used to seeing just from watching the hummingbirds and seeing the different colors on them. And the way one way the bird can be, whether it's flying or sitting at a feeder feeding, you'll eventually get to see all the different variations of color in their little heads. And usually when I sketch my pattern on, I actually go back and erase the most of it in order to not have those lines to have to compete with and worry with. I'm trying to do this in such a hurry so that I can get enough of it done that you can get a gist of it. Okay, we need a little more of that darker color there. So I'll put some color, and then I just take the wet brush and move that color around quickly before it dries. And a little more green in that little back wing section there. This is actually going to go in a frame, and I know this little edge right here is going to be in under the edge of the frame, so I'm not as worried about it on this particular piece. Now on the little branch, I want to create a little shadow area on the bottom. So I just come in with a little bit of paint loaded on the wet brush, and then take a brush with just water, well, same brush, I rinse it, and just kind of pull that in. So then it just creates a little shadowed bottom for the limb. Okay, now I'm going to see if I can get this eyeball in here. With the exception of the eyes in my birds, all of my paintings are strictly, that I do like this, are strictly watercolor. I do go back and use you notice I have to hold my breath when I do that. I do go back and use some thinned acrylic to create the whites in my eyes and the eye ring, just because that's the way I've always done it. So that's the way I do them. I want that a little deeper under there. And there's really no rhyme or reason for the colors that I use, because they can and do vary depending on the bird, the size of the bird. I've just been so tickled with these little tiny birds here lately that that's what I've been enjoying doing. I want to create just a little more of a shadow coming from below the little head and neck area there. So I put a little bit of the dark color right along that edge and then just kind of pull it out. There. Oh, sorry. I don't mean to keep getting my hand in the way. The way I have to set my phone up to record is kind of awkward, so, but I'm trying to get enough of the picture in there. Okay, I'm going to attempt now to use this little bit of thinned acrylic and do the white eye ring. And unfortunately, my vision has gotten worse and worse, so this is actually worse and worse on me to do. Do that. Okay, that looks pretty good. So basically the only other thing I would do is if I wanted some background color around the little bird, I would take just some plain water, and you can do this various ways. This is just what I do. It's just kind of my own little thing that I've developed over the years, and this is just how I do it. And then I just brush mix some of the paint and water and just start applying some color. And because you've got that water already there, then it's easy to move that right where you want it to be, and it will kind of give the illusion that he is in the he's sitting on a tree limb, and you see the blue sky behind him. So you would come in, and you don't really want to take it too terribly close to the bird. And there again, I work in small sections depending on the piece that I've painted, so that as I get the color next to my bird, I don't have to be as worried. And see, in this small section, I'm just going to pick up some of the thinned paint right off the palette and put there. Trying to keep the, like I said, it in the camera view so you can actually see what I'm doing. Okay. And I probably should have gotten my larger round brush that's an actual watercolor brush, but when I sat down here to play with the one I did last night, I just grabbed what was in my little thing from my painting with acrylics, and I never did get up and go get the other brushes. Because you've wet the watercolor paper, it allows you to move that color wherever you need it to be. Like I said, I know this particular painting is going to go in a little bitty frame that I have, so I'm not going to be as concerned about those outer edges so much as just the overall look. So let's get it turned back up. Let's get like that little intense bit of color at the bottom, just to push part of the painting back. Anytime you have dark forward, you push other things back, and I just like to, I think that helps with creating some dimensional look to it. Okay, and a little bit more color right here. And then we can pretty much say this one is done. So that's just what I do to make one of my little watercolor birds. Thanks, y'all.